Welcome to Aurigny on the Airwaves, a podcast series with me, James Filleul, which takes you behind the scenes of Guernsey's airline, Aurigny. Join us as we meet the dedicated people who make the airline soar, giving the Guernsey community a deeper look into the organisation and its operations. So today I'm really pleased to say I'm joined by Aurigny's CEO, Nico Bezuidenhout. Nico, welcome to the podcast series. Just take us back to the beginning of your career in Guernsey. How did it all start?
Hello, James. Thank you for the time. I arrived in Guernsey in October 2020, right at the height of the pandemic. My decision to come here was less of a professional motive and motivation, but much more of a lifestyle decision. I've got an eldest son, a middle son, and then a younger daughter who at the time was 7 years old. The aviation world was utterly upside down. And when I looked around to find a safe place for my family, Guernsey jumped up, and that's why I came across here. I'm not sure that I had any real expectations, so everything has been a pleasant surprise for me. I've got at the time a 7-year-old daughter, and I can honestly say that there is no better place in the world to have a young child, and especially for me coming from a place like South Africa, which is an absolutely gorgeous country, but it's got its challenges from a safety and security standpoint. So it was really welcoming to arrive on the island. The experience in the middle of the pandemic was unlike any other place in terms of the bubble that we had on the island. And when I look back, I couldn't have made a better move for the sake of my family.
Now, we'll get into your work with Aurigny in a second, but do you get time outside of that to enjoy Guernsey? Yes,
I do. I make a point of spending time on walks, cycling, play some tennis. My 20-year-old son has also joined us on Ireland, so there's a lot of time for family time and exploring what is a foreign place for us.
Have you always been in aviation?
I've been in aviation now for the last 25 years. I joined, it was an unexpected turn in my career. Before that I was in e-commerce and distribution. Joined aviation in 2000 to set up e-commerce for South African Airways, the national carrier for South Africa.
So it was e-commerce was your kind of your first love and your first passion at work?
Yes, e-commerce and distribution.
Okay.
And that's in that guise that I joined South African Airways. I ran their direct distribution at a global level for about 5 years. And then SAA, as other national carriers or network carriers, had to contend with low-cost carriers. I got given the assignment to come up with a plan. And from there was born a brand new standalone low-cost carrier, which I had the privilege of setting up and running for 10 years. 10 years and 30 million passengers later, I then was in a caretaker capacity at South African Airways Group, which at that point of time consisted of the national network carrier, the low-cost carrier Mango, an engineering concern, a maintenance organisation, a travel agency group. Did that for a couple of years and then joined Stelios, founder of EasyJet, and ran a London-listed holding company for African airlines. We had airline operations in Tanzania, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, South Africa. It was also a good experience, more with smaller gauge aircraft. And after that, then joined Aurigny.
So you're going to have to join some dots up there, because you came into the business with an e-commerce background, but you ended up going a long way in aviation. Something must have changed in the interim.
Look, I think I was starry-eyed and bushy-tailed. I was still very young at that point in time and probably didn't know my own limits. The initial assignment was how does a full-service, high-cost carrier respond to the low cost and low prices that low-cost carriers offer? And I was given that as effectively as an academic assignment. But during that process, I got exposure to some other carriers and how they responded to it, and I learned a lot. And when I gave the South African government at the time one of four options that they can choose, they chose the Greenfields operation and basically said to me, well, here's a $10 million check at the time. Go set up this airline. If you lose the money, don't come back. And that was honestly it was a great experience for me because I could take everything that I've learned in distribution before outside of aviation, apply it to aviation, do things in new ways, and it was a great success, and build an organisation from scratch to 1,000 employees.
So, I mean, we'll get on to Aurigny next, but just give us a flavour of that. Like, what did you try and achieve there, and what worked?
Well, in Mango, my mandate there was to increase the affordability and accessibility of air travel to a greater portion of the population. Now, in countries like South Africa, credit card penetration is relatively low, internet penetration is relatively low, so a lot of your focus goes on to how do you distribute inventory. So we innovated in that regard. We sold airline tickets through clothing retail stores or through general retailers. We partnered with mobile operators to launch onboard internet. These were great experiences, and the company grew very rapidly to up to 4 million passengers a year. It was a profitable experience. I had profits for 8 out of 10 years. And it was also interesting then to manage the dynamics between South African Airways as the parent company, who was losing market share to all other low-cost carriers, and then the carrier that I was running that was fast growing. Of course, then I got paid back by having to go back to the South African Airways group and now running the older cousin. During that time, again, good experience. 12,000 employees, an international operator. During that time, I served on the Star Alliance Chief Executive Board, got exposure to the International Air Transport Association, where I was president of their AGM. So saw the other side of aviation, the full service carrier side of aviation. So very grateful for those experiences.
And learnings you've taken from them into your current role with Aurigny?
I've been involved in state-owned airlines pretty much from the early 2000s, whether it's just Mango, South African Airways. Subsequent to that, I've been, and currently I am serving as a non-executive director in Central Asia for national carriers in that region. So one of the key learnings is that when you operate a state-owned carrier, you've got a dual mandate. At the one level, you have to perform commercially. You have to break even. There's no free lunch. You can't burden the taxpayer with ongoing losses. But at the same time, you're also not trying to maximize profits. So it's this fine balance of plowing back into the community. So sometimes, for example, it might have been more in our commercial interest to base all our aircraft in the UK rather than on the island. It would have been commercially for the airline itself more financially viable. But if we did that, we would not contribute the £24 million that we contribute per year in terms of local supply chain, local employment. And it's striking that balance, and that is what makes state-owned businesses unique relative to businesses that purely have a capitalistic motive.
Is that confusing?
It can be confusing, and sometimes it's frustrating because there is a business person in me who wants to maximize profits. But in the end, for a carrier like Aurigny, it's also very gratifying to see what we end up doing for the community.
I guess it also means you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, because whichever path you follow, someone will say, well, you should be on the other one. Is that difficult?
Yeah, indeed. Look, everybody's always got an opinion, and they're entitled to the opinions. When you're a state-owned business, people feel more entitled to share that opinion. But again, this is not my first rodeo.
Okay, so let's talk then a little bit about your vision for Aurigny. What's the main objective that you're trying to achieve? Something that guides you through. We talked about potential confusion. You said sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But what guides you through that in terms of what you're trying to achieve for Aurigny?
Well, Aurigny has got 3 clear objectives that's been set by its shareholder right back when I arrived. And the number 1 objective is to protect the lifeline routes. In this case, it is routes operations to Gatwick and to an extent London City, Southampton, and the route to Alderney. And to protect those lifeline routes mean we have to maintain our airline operating certificate. We have to obviously always be safe in the first instance and provide that service in a resilient and reliable manner. That's the objective number 1.
Mm-hmm.
The second objective in that order is financial break-even.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that objective in its own right means that you have to charge fares that matches your cost base, and that you can't shift the burden for air transportation to the taxpayer. You cannot keep on generating deep losses, because in the end somebody has to pick up the tab. It's either the traveller or the passenger. So achieving that balance, and in that regard we had to do a lot of things, some of them unpopular, standardising the fleet, for example. That is clearly with the aim of reducing cost. And
this was losing the jet.
Losing the Embraer, exactly. The third objective is about supporting the developmental objectives and economic objectives of the states of Guernsey. So that means that there's more value when I employ a pilot on the island than employing a pilot off the island. It means there's more value to the economy if I buy something locally and not elsewhere. Related to that objective is also expanding connectivity. Now, a lot of us always focus on the main airports, and 50% of passengers go to the main airports. But there's also 50% of passengers who go to regional airports who need that connectivity to Bristol, to Manchester, to Birmingham. And it's balancing those objectives. So it's those three objectives, and they are in priority order. And in that regard, I take my marching orders from the shareholder. If the shareholder ends up changing those objectives or the order of those objectives, then my job is to try and find the best way of then meeting those new reordered objectives.
Okay, so that really sets out clearly the strategic position that you're working within. Let's get into the specifics for customers listening to this. So first of those, you touched on it, is connectivity and the range of airports available to people in Guernsey. The one that always comes up is Heathrow. So let's deal with that firstly. How do you see that route?
Well, I think that the Heathrow is undeniably is one of the top 5 biggest airports in the world. It's unfortunately also in the top 5 most expensive airports in the world to operate to. As an airline, we continue to try and apply for rights to operate to and from Heathrow. In the end, we need to understand that everything has got a price. And when you do operate into Heathrow, the fact is that something else will have to give. That means that you'll have to forsake frequency to Gatwick or to London City. So in as much as I do see the purpose and value that Heathrow could serve, I also acknowledge and realise and recognise the fact that we've got good connectivity into Gatwick. We one of the top 10 airlines in terms of number of frequencies per day going into Gatwick. The London City frequency that we've added means that Guernsey is one of the most best connected geographies to the financial centre that is London. And it's important that we don't break that, because in the end, if you launch services to Heathrow and you forsake your services to Gatwick, you have got no guarantee that you'll get those landing slots back. And the reality is there is an incremental financial cost to operating to what is the biggest airport in the UK. So, but in the end, it's not a choice that we have right now. We don't have the slots. We will continue to apply for slots. And in the interim, we will continue to deliver as reliable and as resilient service into London, both London City for the business market, but also leisure travellers, and then Gatwick. And Gatwick, of course, is very well connected. Gatwick is better connected to Europe in terms of more cities and destinations is served via Gatwick than out of Heathrow.
What about connectivity elsewhere then, apart from through London?
The connectivity elsewhere, we've in the last number of years launched services into Dublin, which provides a good feed and flow into North America. Manchester, twice daily services into Manchester. We code-share Interline with Emirates out of Manchester as well.
Sorry, so what does Interline mean exactly?
Interline means that the passenger can book a single... There's two benefits. The one benefit is when you go onto Emirates' website, and Emirates is the biggest carrier in the world, international carrier in the world. When you go onto their website, Guernsey features as a destination. So there's a marketing purpose that it serves. From a practical passenger standpoint, it means that you can buy one ticket and through check your baggage from Guernsey through to Cape Town, if that's where you're going on Emirates' services. There's also a financial benefit in the sense that Hypothetically, if I was living right next to Gatwick and I wanted to book a business class ticket to Cape Town, versus booking from Guernsey over Gatwick and getting on that same Emirates flight to Cape Town, that fare is cheaper out of Guernsey for the simple reason that you don't pay air passenger duties on the interline tickets. You also get the additional benefit in the sense that you've got protection in terms of misconnection, weather disrupting the short-haul travel. So it's those three benefits that accrue from interlining. We've got interlining with British Airways as well as Emirates, and we'll be looking to expand more.
Okay, so connectivity at the moment sounds like something you think you believe you're delivering on. Where else do you go with it?
In the end, in terms of your own metal, there's always the distinction between what you do with your own aircraft versus partner carriers. Now, we are constrained by the size of the population, the size of the market that we serve, and the available assets that we've got. So I think where we'll go further is we'll be looking to expand interline operations over Charles de Gaulle and Paris, for example. That provides good connectivity into Europe as the Emirates arrangement. Emirates helps with connectivity into Central Asia and the Far East. As far as direct destinations for Aurigny is concerned, for the next year, a lot of our focus is really stability and resilience rather than planting more flags and creating more direct destinations from our own metal services.
Okay, so connectivity is one side of the equation, fares are the other side of the equation. You'll frequently get the feedback that fares are too high. How do you address that?
It's something that hits home for me. As I've mentioned earlier, I spent 10 years of my life running a low-cost carrier. I've probably got more low-cost carrier DNA and low-fare DNA in me than anything else. The reality of living on a small island with relatively short operating hours, 6:30 in the morning to 9 p.m., it's a very short time that you've got available to sweat your asset base. Now, the asset base for an airline like Aurigny is about £100 million, and it's key that you maximize the use. Now, there's limits in terms of how much we can use the aircraft assets and still have them based on the island.
So when you say sweat the asset base, you mean the use of the aircraft?
Yes, because in the end, aircraft are only financially meaningful when they're moving and operating. So from that perspective, any carrier, whether you're a low-cost carrier or full service or a regional carrier, tries to optimize and maximize the use of those aircraft assets. There's, of course, a fine balance between that and resilience, because in the end, if I don't use my assets very productively and I've got aircraft standing around, I'll have the best resilience in the world because there's always multiple spare aircraft standing still. But that's not economically viable because then I'll have to jack up the pricing substantially to pay for that dormant capacity. So it is a challenge. I can in no way say that I think that it is cheap to operate and fly to and from an island. My job is to try and make it as affordable as it humanly can be. Obviously never forsaking safety, never cutting any corners when it comes to safety. And then also balancing that with the need to try and be as resilient as possible. So it's a balancing act.
You understand the concern that people have. They'll be exposed to UK advertising, and that's pitched at people living near one of the UK regional airports, and they'll be seeing fares to the Sun for £17. That those kind of fare levels. What you're saying, it sounds like, though, is we'll never be able to get to quite that level in Guernsey for the reasons that you set out.
Yes, it won't be possible to get to that level because in the end aviation is a scale business, and the size of your market and the time that you can use to extract value from your assets are two key points. Obviously I'm setting aside the fact that you hardly ever really get a fare for £17 because once you've paid for the use of the overhead lockers and all the other hidden fares, the cost is a bit higher. But yes, it's you're never going to get, unless we get the same size of market, and unless we lift the constraints in terms of operating hours, you won't be able to get the same price points.
Okay, all right. So it's talking there about the connectivity and then the fares. Let's talk a little bit more about what your actual day-to-day life is like. What does the role of an airline CEO involve? Can you just walk us through that?
Precious little from one day to the other is really consistent. Practically in my life, every morning 8:30, myself and my management team engage, have a meeting, talking about what is up for the day, what's the challenges we're dealing with. And from there onwards, it really is a bit of a roller coaster because in the end, I am the last resort in the organisation, so I get to face a myriad of new problems, need to find new solutions. But I also see the best of the world. I also get the notices and messages from passengers when one of our employees have absolutely excelled. And in that regard, Aurigny is truly lucky. In all the airlines that I've worked, I have never seen an airline where the employees are so committed to delivering the service to the passengers. Aurigny truly tries to be the airline that will get you home, and the Aurigny employees do go the extra mile.
As the CEO, though, you're the person, as you said, people will come to with every problem. You're the person people will come to with concerns about connectivity and fares. Do you enjoy it?
I do. I think that I take satisfaction out of seeing the progress. It's like when I started the low-cost carrier I did when I was 29 years old, is to see how things change and progress for the better. Of course, you also go through the times where you go through a difficult patch where things are not going the way they should go, like last year, for example.
Isn't it easier building something new, though, than trying to develop something well-established?
I've had the privilege of building something brand new. I've had the experience of restructuring an organization, an existing large organization, and then changing a small organization. And I can honestly say that it's much more difficult to change a small organization, because the reality is that in an airline like South African Airways, I can remove 10 aircraft from the fleet and the beast is big enough to lumber on, where in a small carrier like Aurigny, you touch one thing and everything is affected by it. So it is a much more refined art to try and restructure or change or optimize a small business than it is a big business. And I think that's true for not just aviation, but any business probably. You
said an interesting thing, though. You said that you enjoy it because you can see progress. Is that true?
Yes, it is true. In the case of Aurigny, we've, setting aside the challenges that we had last year, in the last 5 years, we've had record years of turnover. We've minimized losses, achieved break-even positions. We've never carried more passengers in the 50 odd years of existence of the carrier. So from that standpoint, that is truly gratifying. And then when I look at a more, I suppose, macro scale, and I look at the recovery rate of the visitor economy in Guernsey is better and quicker than the visitor economy in Jersey. If I look at year-on-year passenger growth in Guernsey this year, it outstrips that of both the Isle of Man and Jersey. So when I compare Aurigny with its own delivery historically, we're in a better position. And when I compare the outcome and the benefit for Guernsey as an island, Guernsey sits in a better position relative to the Isle of Man and Jersey.
In terms of the big three for customers, though, we talked about connectivity, we talked about fares. Just drill into the third one, which is on-time performance, getting people where they want to be when they should be there. How are you doing on that?
Aurigny has, again, it's credit that I'll give the management and the company before I arrived. Aurigny historically has been a very reliable airline, with its punctuality rates typically being about 4 to 5 percentage points above what you would see across the average in the UK, notwithstanding the weather conditions we've got here. Last year was a particularly challenging year, and we dropped the ball. We failed our passengers, but we have set about to correct those issues. Now, those issues might not have been all in our control, but regardless, the consumer deserves a punctual service. We've set about correcting that this year. This year we've still had challenges with pilot shortages, but again, we're not unique as an airline. I'm happy to say, though, that our punctuality performance reliability rate is back to 3-4% above the UK average. So from that perspective, happy to have restored the punctuality rates, but of course, effort continues and effort must remain.
I guess what you're talking about in simple terms there is correcting the unforced errors, whether you can't control, but you can control the unforced errors.
No, indeed. So technical reliability of aircraft, making sure that all our processes, procedures are properly followed, our precision timing schedule is well implemented, and that our schedule is designed to be capable of being executed in a reliable and resilient fashion. No, that's in the end one of the key learnings from having run a low-cost carrier. Low-cost carriers have got a simple mantra, and that's simplicity. When you have a simple recipe and you repeat, then you can have consistency, reliability, and in as much as you can be affordability.
Okay, let's move on to some of your partnerships. Tell me about Alderney and Skybus.
One of the key strategy pillars for Aurigny was to try and simplify its fleet. When I arrived in Aurigny, we had Dornier Classics, Dornier New Generations, ATR 72-500s, 600s, and the Embraer. Now, every time that you've got a different aircraft type, you need different types of pilots, certification for both pilots and engineers, different space, pool kits. All of that becomes very expensive. In the case of Alderney, we've got a very small market, 2,000 people or residents. We have 2 dedicated aircraft, the Dornier 228 NGs. The challenge with that particular aircraft is there's only 13 of them flying in the world, which means it's very costly to operate. So it's both the complexity of fleet in Aurigny plus the specific aircraft type. To remedy that situation, we have partnered with Skybus, who operates in the Isles of Scilly. They operate Twin Otters. As from somewhere in November this year, we will bring 2 aircraft operated on their AOC, painted in our colours, managed by us commercially.
But operating on their AOC means operated by Skybus, not by Aurigny.
By Skybus. They've had the last 30 years they've been operating Twin Otters. Now, Twin Otters are typically the aircraft used in these type of PSO arrangements across the UK.
PSO being
public service obligation routes, and that's just a construct where the states of Guernsey provides a subsidy for the air service in Alderney, and that ultimately is required, and there's about 170 of those PSO arrangements across Europe and the UK, and that's typically where a market is just subscale, that if we had to charge the price points to break even, it would simply not be affordable for the community. So by bringing in Skybus, that allows us to focus exclusively on the ATR 72-600 fleet, which means that operationally we end up taking the learnings of a low-cost carrier, that simplicity, into our business, and that manifests in prices that are lower than it otherwise would have been.
Okay, all right, so that's the partnership with Skybus. What about close to home? What about Guernsey Airport?
We continue to work with Guernsey Airport. I think that it's probably fair to say that as a base carrier, we account for just short of 80% of the commercial passengers travelling to and from through Guernsey Airport. It's fair to say that in almost every geography, the base carrier and the airport from which it operates have a volatile relationship, because you're right up in each other's business all the time. I'm happy to say that the relationship between the two airlines have improved. I think that last year was a low point, and I could well understand when we are not reliable and the airport has to stay open longer than what their published hours are. It creates tension and conflict. So that situation has improved, and we continue to work with Guernsey Airport on various initiatives, including, for example, the introduction of the Avi ramps, which provides step-free access into aircraft. We last year collaborated by Aurigny taking the step of installing self-service kiosks in the airport environment, and just collectively trying to work together to try and deliver a better service, because the one thing we ultimately have in common is that both of us exist to serve the residents of Guernsey and the visitors to this island.
Okay, so that kind of leads us back to the start of your career in e-commerce and how you're trying to improve the digital services that you're offering to customers. What developments have there been there? Where are you going next?
We last year saw the importance of having communication channels, for example, that are scalable, especially when things go wrong. This year we spent a lot of focus and time developing a mobile application, looking to launch that during the course of, by the end of October, where that mechanism will be there both for transaction purposes, but also to help ease communication with passengers when you're travelling at the airport, when you're at Bristol, when you're at Manchester, and we need to communicate with you, or you need to communicate with us. Everything is going to go into this app, and it's been in testing for the last month. We'll continue to test it for a further month, and really looking forward to launching it both for transactions and communication purposes.
And that speaks to the customer experience you're trying to create.
Yes, indeed. We've been putting a lot of effort into we've complemented our existing call center operations by adding an offshore call center capability to the existing Guernsey and UK-based call center facilities. The app is another means of trying to communicate with passengers better and be more accessible. The self-service kiosks, the ramp access for stepless access into the aircraft, all of these things are aimed at providing a better service.
Okay. All right. Nico, finally then, we do this in 2 years' time, say, the same interview. What would you have wanted to have achieved? What's coming next?
Well, in the last 5 years, we've managed to keep fare inflation below general inflation. I'd like to try and see more of that. Our reliability, to restore that as we have in the last year, and to provide a reliable service to the consumer. I think that a service like Aurigny is not about trying to always do new things. It is about reliable. It's such a crucial service to the community and to the island that we need to provide it in a reliable fashion, as affordable as we can be.
Okay, Nico, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, James.
Thanks for listening to Aurigny on the Airwaves with me, James Filleul. Check out the rest of this podcast series to find out more about Guernsey's airline, Aurigny.